Yo, 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 yo. We are watching Are You Becoming Immune to Horror by Cromudgeon? Yeah, Cromudgeon. But I just watched a a short horror film. It was really, really, really good. I think part of the reason I think it was so good was because it subverted my kind of like my expectations as to what was going to happen with other stuff. I also thought, it's been a while since I've really watched something that kind of like gives me like that makes me want to like be afraid of what goes bump in the night. I haven't seen a horror movie that's done that for me, or a short horror film that's done that for me in fucking probably over a decade at the very least. So I was wondering, and I'm sure many of us are that are big horror buffs, are we becoming immune to horror, or desensitized, as I like to say it? Are we desensitized to the horror? My answer is yeah, partially, and partially no. It really comes down to what your expectations are and how you subvert those expectations. But we'll see where it goes. And yeah, let's just get right into it, gamers.
Horror is the most deeply personal genre by
It is
its
very,
definition. While most genres such as fantasy, sci-fi, and romance are all defined by elements within the world of the story, horror is defined by the raw emotion within the viewer.
That's actually a very, very good point. The story of the world in a lot of like, especially in like, I'm playing Baldur's Gate right now. The story of the world is so much more interesting and so fun to like really delve into, than to be like, oh, I'm going to be some big barbarian that fights everything, It's more like I like to learn about the religions and about the culture and about the different people and how every race somehow hates me. How every race just somehow hates me in some way, shape, or form and finds a new way to call me a slur. But anyways, he's definitely onto something with that, because when it comes to horror, the emotion that they're trying to bring out, they're very much trying to bring out the emotion in you. They're trying to give you some type of shock value that will in turn not resonate but jar you in a specific way to kind of be freaked out.
Perhaps the most similar genre in this regard is,
which comes
enough,
with subverting
comedy.
expectations.
However, while your sense of humor tends to grow with more exposure to comedy,
yeah, that's fair.
your
sense
of horror seems to go in the opposite direction. As you experience more,
I definitely agree with the fact of horror. As you watch more of it, you as you say, you do kind of come a little more desensitized to it. But when it comes with comedy, I mean, even at the same, like you hear one you hear one knock knock joke, you hear all the knock knock jokes type of thing. So if one chicken's crossed the road, you heard every chicken that's crossed the road.
more horror, things which used to keep you up at night become comfortable. In some ways,
that kind of goes into the subverting expectations. So what makes a good joke or a good comedian, in my opinion, is when the routine and stuff that they're doing it's not formulaic. It's not something that you can be like, okay, tell joke, move on. Tell joke, move on. It's like tell joke, jive for a little bit, yap, do whatever, maybe talk to like an audience member or something for a sec. Something that kind of makes it more interpersonal and creates that better experience.
This is a natural part of growing up.
Same with horror.
As you get
can
older,
do the same with
the
horror.
divide between fact and fiction grows, and the monsters of your childhood are revealed for what they truly are.
I mean, that's true too.
Reflections of your own lack of understanding. As we get older,
That's
we
actually a good
recognize
point.
that there really aren't monsters hiding in the closet, under the bed, or in the attic.
Okay, I will say he is right about that, but at the same time, as a 27-year-old adult, I hear like a weird knocking in my house, like at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm not talking like a very slight thing. I'm talking like a giant bang, because that I've been hearing that lately here and there. When I hear that, that's when I'm like, oh fuck. Oh shit, I'm about to die, aren't I? There's something in my house.
There really aren't monsters hiding in the closet, under the bed.
Put the knife next to my bed.
Attic. But there's something more that happens in the case of horror enthusiasts. Something I've experienced quite personally, and that I think many of you will be able to relate to. So here, having made many new Halloween memories, I'm feeling retrospective. I want to briefly delve into the fears of the past so that we might learn more about the horrors of the present.
That's interesting. He's definitely not wrong. If you analyze like horror in I guess the 2000 early 2010. I mean, you could even go farther back than that. You go all the way to something like Lovecraft if you really want to go to it. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe. While again, not horror movies, but horror authors and writers and shit like that, they placated on fears all the time. Half of the Cthulhu mythos is basically just like fears that Lovecraft formulaically saw and expanded upon on his own. He took something that you would be casually afraid of and ramped up to a fucking 12 or 11. And that's how you get some of the creatures and some of the lore and mythos that you have for the Lovecraft universe. Pretty crazy if you ask me. And you could do the exact same if you look at newer, you can do it, but you can do it to newer stuff, but it's not done well. For example, the concert horror film, whatever it was, the one that recently came out with like a serial killer, like it's relatable and it's something that you would actually like, you could actually be afraid of, you know, you could actually see some real fear of like going to like Coachella or going to Warped Tour or something like that, and there's just a fucking serial killer there and they're starting to murder people. Like that is actually terrifying. That is something common people in today's time would be afraid of. They're not going to be afraid of some guy riding around on a rickshaw or anything like that. They're going to be afraid of the guy that's able to track you up from your cell phone and find you when you're going to the porta potty. You know, it's crazy.
It was Halloween 2011.
It
was Halloween 2011. I had dressed up as the main character from my favorite game at the time, Bastion. It was the most excited I'd been about Halloween in a while, because that year I was going trick-or-treating with a couple of my best friends, but I wasn't excited about candy or going door to door.
Wait, that had a little disclaimer on the bottom. That had a little disclaimer on the bottom. One sec.
No.
SCPs.
I was excited because I heard
SCPs have their own fucking whole crazy lore.
A haunted house.
Oh, that's sick.
That sort of thing rarely happens out in the boonies where I'm from, so it was a big deal for 12-year-old Crow. The sun took its sweet time crawling across the orange October sky, but when it finally dipped below the horizon, my friends and I raced across an unfamiliar neighborhood. I never wanted to forget the experience, so I even brought a video camera with me.
That's an old camera.
Record it all, every scare, every monster, every scream. Immortalized in crystal
Those cameras
clear.
Actually crazy, right? Imagine.
Scream immortalized in crystal clear 480p. The three of us rounded the corner, and I might have gotten about 20 feet from the entrance before crystal the excitement in my body catalyzed and transformed into pure dread.
Oh.
I was frozen, not by the cool night's breeze through the dark valley, but by my
It did get cold back then during
What had
fall.
I gotten myself into? And more importantly, how could I get out of it?
I'm analyzing this too much.
I couldn't. In the end, my friends basically had to drag me into the house.
Oh, there you go.
What's worse, I somehow ended up at the front of the group. As I was ushered into a dark garage.
Well, I mean, when all your friends you say dragging, but it's not like they were like grabbing you by your hand. They were probably pushing you from behind to get into the door. So, I mean, that's probably why, you were first, my dude. Let's be honest. You were first. The ones that are always the scariest to go in, I need the push to go in first. And yeah, they were first.
Squeezed my eyes shut.
You are the sacrifice, the tribute.
And allowed myself to be pushed forward by the group. At one point, I dared to take a glance to my left and saw a table covered in latex heads roughly hacked off at the neck.
Nice.
My eyes snapped shut and stayed that way until I stumbled back blindly into the chill of the neighborhood. I was out of the house, but that feeling I experienced...
I was out of the house and into the fire.
It was a sick, sticky kind of feeling in the pit of my stomach. The sort of feeling that keeps you up at night, tossing and turning for hours, always certain that your next turn will bring you face to face with the object of your terror. It was fear. An awful feeling, to be sure.
Scaredy cat.
But I wanted more.
Yeah.
Horror had its hooks in me, even if
I had the same, I think everyone has the same experience, or at least just about everyone has the same first experience when it comes to like haunted hayrides and haunted houses and stuff like that. Like the first time you do it, you do have like fear, and in my case, I don't think I closed my eyes and stuff like that. I think I stayed pretty aware of stuff just because I'd rather like look it in the face rather than be closed and everything be a mystery, because that just makes it more anxiety. It gives me more anxiety. How far I got in to it, but I'm pretty sure I didn't get too far in before I was like right next to my sister the entire time.
Didn't dare set foot in another haunted house again. Fear followed me from then on. In high school, I was up late one night chatting with a few strangers in an online chat room.
As
Everything
you
was
usually
going
do.
fine, but midnight struck, the conversation took a turn, and I saw it. I was such a coward in high school that even a simple image like this could throw me off my whole night. 4 hours later, I finally managed to fall asleep in a very brightly lit room. Still, there was that feeling again. The drive
Everyone
to
had
find
that experience at least some
more.
point. More.
Fear became a friend I could rely on in my teenage years when I
Pen
started to
pal?
read and listen to
Creepypasta, yeah.
I particularly remember The Rake being a story that kept me up at night.
That's a classic.
Been Drowned
That's
was
a
another
classic
one.
channel right
Even
there.
more than the stories, however, the images associated with them clung to me. They became the faces that I envisioned watching me from the foot of my bed. The classic Jeff the Killer image stuck with me for a long time, even if the story didn't. I started to realize
Notice how it
just how much
changed too,
fun
which
there
was kind of
to be
weird.
had in horror.
Whatever.
I read all that I could and even wrote a few stories of my own. However, as I got deeper and deeper into the genre,
Did I ever write any horror
started to
stories? I
sleep
don't think
better
I ever
some
wrote my
nights.
own
And then
horror stuff.
every night, it seemed like the more I
Yeah.
fed my hunger for horror, the more starved I became.
Oshinoko,
That sick,
something.
sticky feeling started to abandon me. Those faces lost their home at the foot of my bed. There was no monster in my closet. And I wasn't afraid. There were still things I enjoyed
Yeah,
about
I mean,
horror, of
that makes
course,
sense though.
but the sting was gone. Monsters ceased to be scary. Not really, anyway.
That's
Even when I
because
would
you
watch a
realize
new-
that there are no werewolves, that there are no zombies, that fucking the closest thing that we've ever had to killer clowns is like John Wayne Gacy and shit like that, you know? It's not like the what is it? The I forget, did the monster from the Ring, the girl from the Ring have a name? Either way, it's not like the girl from the Ring is going to come out of your fucking TV or anything like that, you know? It's less that you overindulge yourself. It's just you realize you become more rational in your thinking, more or less, you know? Like you can see someone that's like slasher films, like those are more realistic in the sense that like it's a person on person violence, where that's more realistic than obviously something like The Exorcism. I don't know. He's definitely right. I think he's definitely right about like oversaturating it and showing yourself, like overexposing yourself to horror does desensitize you to a bit. But it's also, as you get older, you start to use more rationality in your assumption and in your processing of these things. Like when you're a kid, you don't really think of for one, you haven't been alive long enough to know much of the world, but you also don't know if that's actually real or not. And once that type of like magic, I guess, in the world starts to fade, it becomes more rational, and that rationality helps you to discern fact from fiction a lot better.
Movie and think to myself, man, what a scary monster. I really meant something like, that monster is well designed, or
Yeah.
wow, this really breaks the mold. During
Facts.
this time, I discovered the utter mastery
Junji Ito,
of
my boy.
Junji Ito.
My boy.
Ito's works solidify him as one of the greatest horror authors to have ever lived, and certainly
does some
my
insane
favorite.
work.
His work, in my mind, is everything that horror should be. Every story is a twist on the realm of ordinary experience, ambiguous, and only tells you just enough to make the story scary. Most importantly, it's varied. Reading the long
Yes, they
Dream
are very
feels
different. Each
totally
one is
different from
very
reading
different.
Splatter film or The Hanging Balloons, but all
The
three
Hanging Balloons is
are disturbing in
gnarly.
their own way. Diving into Ito's catalog for the first
I
time
actually,
felt like
I read while I was doing my research for it. I saw the Hanging Balloon stuff. I read it. It was brutal.
an exploration of some untouched sphere of the human mind, and I loved it. I loved it so much that I had to know why I loved it. The world of cosmic horror opened up to me, and I began to
Oh,
analyze
cosmic
the
horror is
indiscernible,
wild.
to understand the unthinkable, and to know the unknowable. And that, my friends, was where I hit a wall. Horror is something that I love, so I study it intensely. I try to get as
fair
much of
enough.
it as I can, and I try to figure out what makes some horror work and some horror fall flat. I want to understand why it is that the enigma of Amigara Fault makes my skin crawl, and why Jeff the Killer kind of just makes me laugh.
Because, I mean, for one, he looks, I mean, it made me laugh when I was a kid, too, when it first came out, because it wasn't scary, in my opinion. It looked more like the Joker type of thing. It's the same with like killer clowns and how like people thought those were scary for a while and they would run from people in clown costumes. It's not scary, you know? Clowns aren't scary. I find you're not fucking Pennywise or anything. You're not John Wayne Gacy, you know? And even if you were John Wayne Gacy, I mean, he was a big dude, but he was fat and slow, you know? So I think I could take a couple John Wayne Gacys.
And I know I'm not the only one who does this. There's plenty of discourse online right now surrounding
analog
horror.
horror. Yeah, analog horror has gotten very popular
things
lately.
Have gotten stale. It's not that we're immune to horror. Most horror these days just isn't scary.
I would say stuff. Well, I don't know. I say only fanatics, like people who are really into like horror and shit like that. For one, even know what analog horror is to a degree. Like if I was to text my friend right now and be like, "Hey, what is analog horror?" They'd probably be like, "What the fuck is that, dude?" I mean, they're not on the internet as much as I am, obviously, but yeah, they would have no fucking clue what this is, what analog horror is. I think that's more of a hardcore horror fan genre.
But what would be scary? I have a sneaking suspicion that
interpretations of reality in a warped and skewed view.
Not for everyone, anyway. No new trend is going to come along and.
That's not true. At least that's not true. I don't think so, in my opinion, because what matters is how what mediums they use and how they look at society and how they turn the fears of society into horror. You know what I mean? I keep going back to Lovecraft because he really is like a godfather of horror. And same with Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, they used very mundane, everyday things that they saw in their life as subject matter to make full-on universes for horror. You know, it's pretty wild. I really wish I could remember like what exactly he based it off of, but Cthulhu is based off of based off of fear that he had, along with a lot of the other entities that he created. They're based off of fears. Edgar Allan Poe, he had a short story that, I mean, I still remember it, about the ravens. That it's because ravens are dark. Ravens represent death in a lot of cases, and that's where a person can kind of find that connection to it. They eat dead animals, and you see them picking out eyes and shit like that. Like when did he live? Actually, I need to make sure I don't flub this up. Yeah, it was in the 1800s. I was right. Woo! Imagine if it was like 17. I guarantee it wasn't 17, but. Yeah, he died October 7th, 1849, and I mean, people were afraid of death. People were afraid of crows, and that's what that fear brought in them. So you could do the same here. As I said before, you could take a concept like social media and do it, which has been done, but I don't think very well, in my opinion, because they're not really focusing on the right aspects of what people fear about it. Like, for example, when it comes to social media, people fear the other people on the other side of the screen. You know, you don't know who you're talking to half the time, and then on top of that, you don't know what is true and what's not true on the internet anymore. Like, there is so much stuff. Like, imagine a horror film that's based on like the truth and the lies of social media and how it affects society in order to start killing people. You know, it's kind of like The Purge, you know, mixing The Purge with social media almost to a degree. So I don't know. I think that you can find those things. You just have to look very hard at society as a whole and think about what society focuses on, what society kind of fears as a collective thought. That's just my opinion, at least. Obviously, I mean, other people have varying opinions.
Revitalize that old sense of dread within us, because the issue isn't with horror. The issue is with us. Thousands of new viewers find out about analog horror every single day. I know because I hear from you guys in my comments.
Okay, so that's, well, yeah, you say that's what I mean. Analog horror isn't a mainstream form of horror that society has like consciously come to be aware of. Not many people really watch it. I guarantee none of my friends have ever heard of analog horror.
It's still giving new viewers and new audiences that same feeling that we used to get. It's just not doing it for us anymore. That's not to say that every piece of horror media is perfect or scary or even good, but what I am saying is that some of us have traded fear for understanding.
Okay.
Without ever recognizing that such a transaction was taking place. Now,
no, I think you can have an understanding and still have fear, though. That's the thing, and that's kind of my whole point here, and that I'm trying to talk about is that you can understand. This is going to be a very, very radical example, but it does connect to it. So you can have an understanding for, say, cannibalism. Back in the day, I mean, back in the day, like literally fucking. This one I think.
Sit here and try to.
This one I think is in the 1700s. Let me just double check. Yeah, originally published in 1729. There was something called the Modest Proposal during the Irish potato famine, because potatoes were like their main form of food and export and everything like that. They were having a famine. Potatoes were dying. The crops weren't growing. All that type of stuff. And there was this guy that gave basically a proposal saying, hey, we just have to eat children, pretty much. If we eat children, we won't have to worry about a lack of food. You can understand, like, I'm not going to explain the whole thing. If you want, you can look at it. You can look it up yourself and read the story, or read the article that he wrote for it. But he explains himself. He has a good understanding, but he also understands that people don't like this, that people are fearful of this, that this is not an acceptable cultural norm, which is why it would never happen. You connecting it to this, you understand as the viewer, as the reader, that there is this issue going on, but you still have the fear, you still have the resentment, you still know in your mind that cannibalism, eating a child, is fucking wrong and disgusting and gross. Like, it's dark shit, man. It's real dark shit. And that is where you kind of find the overlap between understanding and having fear at the same time.
Explain this to you in detail, but I think it'd be
even
if
you understand something doesn't mean you can't be afraid of it.
Than myself explain it to you. Now, when I had mastered the language of this water and come to know every trifling feature that bordered the great river as familiarly as I knew the letters of the alphabet,
yep,
I had made a valuable acquisition, but I had lost something too. I had lost something which could never be restored to me.
The mystery.
As long as I lived. All the grace, the beauty, the poetry had gone out of the majestic river. I still kept in mind a certain wonderful sunset which I witnessed when steamboating was new to me. A broad expanse of the river was turned to blood. In the middle distance, the red hue brightened into gold, through which a solitary log came floating, black and conspicuous. In one place, a long, slanting mark lay sparkling upon the water. In another, the surface was broken by boiling, tumbling rings that were as many-tinted as an opal.
Okay.
Where the ruddy flush was faintest was a smooth spot that was covered with graceful circles and radiating lines ever so delicately traced. The shore on our left was densely wooded, and the somber shadow that fell from this forest was broken in one place by a long, ruffled tree. And high above the forest wall, a clean-stemmed dead tree waved a single leafy bough that glowed like a flame.
Like, that is so descriptive.
Splendor that was flowing.
I don't know if he wrote this or if he's quoting something, but we'll find out in a sec.
Curves,
hopefully.
Reflected images, woody heights, soft distances, and over the whole scene, far and near, the dissolving lights drifted steadily, enriching it every passing moment with new marvels of coloring. I stood like one bewitched. I drank it in speechless rapture. The world was new to me, and I had never seen anything like this at home. But as I said, a day came when I began to cease from noting the glories and the charms which the moon and the sun and the twilight wrought upon the river's face.
Okay.
Another day came when I ceased altogether to note them. Then, if that sunset scene had been repeated, I should have looked upon it without rapture. I should have commented upon it inwardly after this fashion. The sun means that we're going to have a wind tomorrow.
Okay.
That floating log means the river's rising. Small thing. The slanting mark on the water refers to a bluff reef, which is going to kill
I don't need a whole
steamboat one of these nights.
transcription of like
It keeps on stretching
of
out
a
like
story.
that. Those tumbling boils show a dissolving bar and a changing channel there.
Unless this is his
The
example.
lines and circles in the slick water over yonder are a warning that the troublesome place is shoaling up dangerously. That silver streak in the shadow of the forest is the break from a new snag, and he's located himself in the very best place he could have found to fish for steamboats. That tall, dead tree with a single living branch. It's not going to last long, and then how's anybody supposed to get through this blind place at night without that friendly old landmark? No, the romance and beauty were all gone from the river.
Yes.
All the value any feature of it had for me now was the amount of usefulness it could furnish towards compassing the safe piloting of a steamboat.
Okay, so basically what he's saying with all of this, but basically he's making a comparison of someone who has gone through the process of really researching, exploring this using an example, this river, and as a result the river itself has lost some of its actual marvel. And before you were exploring it, searching it for whatever purpose you were doing it before. I mean, he didn't really give a purpose. It could have been for piloting the steamboat at the very beginning. So, I mean, it's kind of like the point of it in order just to explore. But anyways, he explored the whole fucking riverbed, and he realized that at the end of it, after exploring everything that he could explore, the only thing he could get out of it now was figuring out how to pilot or pilot a steamboat. I don't know if drive a boat. Do you drive a boat or do you pilot a boat? That's actually a good question. Either way, I think, yeah. And because he's understood it so well, he now there's no mystery. There's no mystique. There's no aspect of it that's really enthralling to him anymore. But if we're talking about a river, if we're talking about this type of stuff, well, rivers change, guy. Not just the actual form, not just the actual shape of the river itself, but what's around the river, the entity, the animals, the habitats, all that. October 9th, 2024, I figured out everything on this. I figured out or seen everything that's on this riverbed pretty much. October 9th, 2026, there's a good chance that I go back to the riverbed and it's different. There's new things to explore. But the little intricacies around it, you do not know anymore. That's just how it is. Your understanding of it, your understanding of it is from a past understanding of it. It's the same with horror. Whereas if you understand it, again, I'm just trying to point back to my whole topic, or my whole point is that even if you understand something, there can still be new aspects of fear, new aspects of horror that can be expanded upon by looking at society, looking at these issues, looking at whatever topic you want to look at and expanding upon it.
Since those days, I've pitied doctors from my heart. What does the lovely flush on a beauty's cheek mean to a doctor but a break that ripples above some deadly disease? Are not all her visible charms sewn thick with what are, to him, the signs and symbols of hidden decay? Does he ever see her beauty at all? Or doesn't he simply view her professionally, upon her unwholesome
So there's still more to
condition
find.
all to himself?
My parents have been married for 20 years, 30 years, something like that. And 30 years, I think. And they've been alive. Well, actually, no, they've been alive since they're 60s. They're in their 60s. My dad's 65. But they've known each other literally since they were children. You know, they've known each other since they were fucking children. But you know, they get older, stuff changes, they formulate different opinions about things, and you can still learn something new about someone even all this time later. And I mean, as their child, I've seen it, you know? They're still together. They still are happily married, and it's like they're married because they still find new things, not only to do with each other, but not only to do by themselves, but to do with each other, and they find new aspects of each other.
And doesn't he sometimes wonder whether he's gained most or lost most by learning his trade?
I definitely think he's definitely on to like something as he's saying this, because he does have a really good point that understanding the fear does lower the fear, lower the impact that you have of that fear in general. But that's only to stuff that you are understanding, that you understand and that you have been exposed to previously, relatively speaking. So if you're exposed to one Conjuring movie, there's a good chance you could watch the other one. There's a good chance you'll watch all the other ones and be like, yeah, that's like the original. That's like this one. That's like that one. I understand all of that, so I'm not as fearful of it. But it's still creepy, and they have minor differences.
This is the same position that many of us find ourselves in. All the poetry in horror has been replaced by sheer practical understanding, an analytical abstraction of what's really scary, a picture of what horror should be. Of course, I'm just some dummy online, not an actual master of horror, but I didn't need to develop true mastery over the genre to get to this point. Just an attitude of mastery towards horror.
See, that's counterproductive, though. I don't think you should do that, my dude. If you go into anything, I genuinely don't think there's really like a full-on expert in anything, because there's always more to learn about stuff. For example, I've been watching anime since I was like in fucking 6th grade, you know? I've been watching anime for a long fucking time. And even before that, but I really started to get into anime around middle school. I mean, I watched like 4Kids and all that as a child, and Toonami. But that, I mean, like I wasn't like a huge anime head at that point in my life. I was just a kid watching Inuyasha, watching One Piece, and watching Naruto, those type of things. But anyways, just because you have some understanding, not all the understanding, but just because you have some understanding of some aspects of a topic or a subject, does not make you a master. It does not mean anything. Does not mean there will never be any progress or changes in the future to that. So to say that you're a master of it is almost like when you go into a horror movie and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to be scared. Yeah, I'm going to try to rationalize everything. Yeah, I'm going to just let yourself fucking watch it, dude. I hate to say it, but sometimes you really just have to let yourself just watch it, because if you don't just let yourself watch it and you sit back and try and break down point by point and analyze things, you're obviously not going to be as scared, because you're trying to downplay the impact of the horror. You're trying to kind of mitigate the actual fear that you're supposed to be feeling right now with more rational and analytical thought patterns. Not a good aspect to come at horror from. I would never call myself a master in literally anything. And even if I'm an 80-year-old man, gray hair, that's watched over like 2,000 anime, you know what I would still say? I'm not a fucking master. I don't know everything. Of course I don't know everything. There's going to be new stuff that happens, and there's going to be stuff that changes the norms that you once knew. To say anything different is just kind of ridiculous, in my opinion. So that's just me, though. I'm another idiot on the internet.
And I put it in
but
a box.
Opinion should be based on facts.
Once, I only
not
cared
feeling.
about the feeling that horror
That's
gave
my
me.
opinion.
But over time, I carved out a particular criteria for judging horror to be good or condemning it as bad. Prioritized mastery over madness.
You're trying to analyze it. You're trying to break it down into more formulaic than it should.
That I spent so long chasing. I had accidentally chased it out of fiction entirely.
Well, yeah, exactly. You were chasing it to... Never mind.
I don't regret it. As I said, my love for horror has never been deeper.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's hard not to mourn a little for that feeling that I may not ever get back.
So I love horror. I actually love horror more than I liked horror when I was a kid, obviously, because I was just scared I would just get scared. Now I do understand aspects of it, and honestly, understanding certain aspects of horror does make it more traumatic. Um, if you were to watch Get Out as like a 6 year old, or not 6, if you were to watch Get Out as like a 13-year-old, you would not understand some of the themes that they placate in it. Whereas when you watch it, where if I was to watch it right now, and I mean, I watched it when I was an adult, um, I can really pick apart the themes and the plot that they're trying to portray throughout it, and that gives it a much deeper level of horror, in my opinion. Now, in terms of like whether I'm scared of something, yeah, I'm not, because that's where I think it's just desensitized. That's where I thought that. Again, this is immune. The title of this is immune to horror. I call it being desensitized to horror, meaning that you've seen so much of it that it's just like the actual impact in seeing it does not garner a physical reaction. And that's what I mean. I'm desensitized to that type of stuff. There's not really much you can show me where I'm going to have that same type of reaction that I did to when I first watched that, because it needs to be worse than that in order for me to react to it.
Back. Of course, there's still the nagging voice in the back of my head, which says that fear isn't something so small I could ever box it up. Life is full of unknowns. To box up one's fear means to box up the whole world. To seal off the sun and the stars, to snuff out existence itself. I'm not so bold as to believe that sort of power rests in my hands. After all, am I not that same scared child who was afraid to step into that garage 12 years ago?
Of
course I am.
I still run up the fucking stairs when I turn off all the lights, you know? It's one of those things. It's just engraved in your memory. You're like, yeah, I know there's nothing fucking down here, but shit, I don't want to be standing in the dark. I prefer having noise while I sleep, because it's actually creepier for me to sleep in like dead silence and then hear something, you know? Like I'd rather hear animals out, like I'd rather listen to like the stuff outside, like animals outside, or a white noise machine, or even my AC in the summer. Like all that stuff really helps me sleep, because even though I know there's nothing around me, it helps drown out any type of noise that might cause my brain to start thinking differently.
I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I had brought a camcorder with me into that house.
Oh yeah, finally we can see the footage.
I only rewatched the video once. That was enough to tell that the footage was pretty much unusable. I had mostly recorded the floor and the walls, nothing interesting.
Fair.
And I had totally failed to capture the true nature of that experience. But despite that, here I am, 12 years later, and I can remember every single second.
Well, yeah,
I never
that's because it's a key memory. It's a focal memory in your development as a child.
And this Halloween, I took the plunge.
Literally, what is it? I remember being a child and watching 4Kids, and I remember, the first anime I watched was, the first anime I watched independently on my own in like the aspect of like wanting to like really get into anime was Angel Beats. That was the first anime that I truly like went out, found, and dived into by myself, watching by myself. Before that, it was shonen stuff, and did I even watch like other anime back then? I don't even think I really watched other anime that like. No. All right, so obviously your base shonen ones, but I also remember I watched like fucking Sekirei and Rosario plus Vampire. I think it was just Sekirei. Yeah, no, I think it was actually just Sekirei, because I watched Rosario plus Vampire after I watched Angel Beats. But yeah, I watched that with my cousin though when I watched Sekirei. That's an interesting one. I'm not getting into Sekirei, but anyways, I watched Angel Beats, and I still remember pretty much the whole plot. I remember all that stuff about it. Same with like if we're talking about what is it? If we're talking about like when I went to Tennessee with my family on a vacation, like I can still remember how many times I rode one particular roller coaster because it sparks something in you. Once that spark is lit, you remember what lit that spark.
Once again, I cracked the top off my box of fears, and I did something that I had been dreading
It's a core
since
memory
2011.
of basically everything that accumulated.
It wasn't particularly
If
extreme.
you hadn't done
Anyone
that,
with
would
a
you
modest
be
experience with haunted
making this
houses
type of video
wouldn't
right
even
now?
be phased.
Is the question.
But getting chased through a maze by a dozen men in spirit Halloween masks was... it was special to say the least. It was overwhelming. It was at times hilarious. But most importantly, it was the most afraid that I have been in years.
Yeah, because you didn't understand anything.
I'm Curmudgeon. Thanks for watching.
That was actually a really good video. Obviously, I have my own opinions and my own, and like not counterpoints, but just different perspectives, I guess you could say, on it, because we both like I said, I think he's very on to something when he says the fear and the understanding have a correlation between each other. It's just, I think understanding fear, even if you understand fear or you understand an aspect of it, does not mean that you understand every aspect of it, and does not make you immune to all aspects of it. It's all about subverting expectations and doing stuff in a way that people can see and relate to in their daily lives, which is what famous authors like Edgar Allan Poe, I keep saying it, Edgar Allan Poe and Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, that they succeeded in. They succeeded in doing that by creating cosmic horrors that somehow connected to fears and the realities of people. Just regular people. And you can still do that in today's day, because all you have to do is look at society, look at what interests society have, what unknowns there are in society, and how can you warp and twist them into something that is pretty terrifying. Because I think it can be done. I honestly think that Serial Killer in the concert movie could have been a fucking amazing fucking movie if it didn't just become a glorified promotion for the music video, the singer, the artist that's performing. At least that's what I honestly never watched it. I never watched that one. But from what I hear, and the reviews that I've read about it, that's kind of just that's the big takeaway that most people get from it. Anyways, that was a really good video. Check out Curmudgeon if you want to if you're interested in diving into all things horror. He doesn't just, I've been watching stuff like short films and franchise dives a lot, but he kind of does more analytical concepts of what horror is, and he tries to analyze some more stuff in other videos. But yeah, maybe we'll watch some more later. We'll see. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey, what is up? You are an absolute legend if you made it this far in the video. I really appreciate it, and if you could just do me one more quick favor, hit that like and subscribe button down below. It really helps me out. I stream on Twitch Wednesdays to Saturdays starting around 12 p.m. EST. And yeah, there's plenty of crazy unhinged madness that goes on over there too. So I hope to see you there, and I'll catch you in the next video.